If you're not really happy with how your oil painting portraits are turning out, it maybe has something to do with how you approach your drawing process and everything that comes after that. This method I'm going to discuss today is the way I love to paint. I find that it really creates a lot of freedom, and that is painting like a sculptor. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, think about how a sculptor goes about putting the features of the face into place. They will start with the overall features first and then work their way to smaller and smaller details. So the first thing they're going to work with is the overall shape of the head. The overall scale of the head's their first thought, getting that placed in the right spot, and then working on maybe the general shape of the forehead, the general shape of the cheekbones, the jawline, the nose, all these bigger features that are very pronounced and are some of the larger portions of the face to get correct before moving down the line into more detail. So after they get those things into place, they feel confident they are in the right spot, that's when they'll start to add a bit more detail. They'll start thinking about putting more definition in the nose, getting the nostrils into place, getting the mouth and lips more detailed, getting the eye wells, and then eventually getting the pupils and the actual eyes themselves in the right location. All these things happen in a progressive way as a sculptor. So if you were to go about painting that way, you may find that you have a bit more freedom in those initial stages where you're not worrying about all those little details first and then being sort of held to those locations later on. Now, as you can see with this painting, I'm already starting to apply some of those thoughts of painting like a sculptor just in these very beginning stages. I'm just getting those general shapes into place. I'm not worrying about any of those fine details. I'm trying to get the darker shadows done first, and then I just sort of progressively work towards the lighter areas. I'm starting from the bottom and kind of working my way up. Now, there's many paintings where I may start from the top down. That varies from painting to painting, but I'm not worrying about details. I may be getting a general idea where things are located, like the eyes, the nose, the mouth, but they're so loose and I haven't spent a lot of time with them that I won't feel any sort of obligation to keep them where they're located. If I find out later on after I've put this entire face together, I've gone that first sort of rendering pass across the whole face and I go, oh, okay, well, the eyes need to shift down a little bit. The nose needs to go to the left or right a little bit. Those kinds of adjustments are a lot easier to deal with earlier on, and you won't feel like you're wasting a bunch of time while doing it this way. And there's actually quite a few advantages, I think, by going this direction with your portrait painting process. The first one that I feel is a huge benefit, at least for the way I like to paint, is that it keeps the painting as loose as possible. Now think about if you were to start with a line drawing and get everything located. You get the eyes, the nose, the mouth, everything's so perfect. You're so happy you got everything drawn just right with a pencil or even with a paintbrush. You've spent all this time just locating everything down to where the pupil is or where the nostrils are located. Now you're stuck having to work right up against those lines. You're going to be afraid to paint over those lines, which can feel sort of restrictive. Another benefit that I find is really helpful when you paint this way is you start to become more confident that you could paint over any portion of your painting. Say you want to just color shift a whole section of your portrait painting, but that requires you to paint over the entire thing. You'll start to feel confident that you can rebuild this entire section of a painting. Say you want to paint over the whole upper half and just redo the eyes to be a slightly different color. You won't feel like you have to save any sort of line drawing or drawing below. You can just paint over it and know that you can get it back to that same level that you had it at without the need for any line drawing to help guide you along the way. And another benefit that I think really will help free you up to try new things as far as how you approach oil painting is the ability to paint with really thick amounts of paint. You can paint as opaque as you want. You won't have to use glazes so that you can still see below and see those lines that you've drawn in before. You won't have to just slowly build up those glazes and work up to the edge of the lines. You'll be able to paint right over anything you want to with the thickest amount of paint, but this will require you to build up those abilities to see the shapes within the face and how those puzzle pieces go together to get those correct proportions. And this will take some time to learn this process, especially if you are working in a line-based method where you are doing a lot of edge drawing at the beginning to get the locations of all the facial features. It's going to take some time to switch over to more of a shape-based sculptor type method like I use. And that's where you could go to my website, my Patreon website, to learn from the tutorials I've put on there. It'll show you all the steps. There's tutorials that will show you how to paint the nose, the mouth, all the different features of the face. And after you've done a few of those tutorials, you'll start to get a hang of how to see the shapes within the face and how to approach it in a less detailed way initially and build that detail in as you get further along with your portrait painting. Now at this point, with my current painting that I'm showing here, you see that I'm going into some color, and this color is just going to be put right over top of the existing facial features, especially over the eyes, and I'm sort of dialing back the detail of the eyes and creating some abstraction and more expressionism with these sort of color shifts. This is just how I like to paint. Obviously, you can do so many other things, find your own style for sure, but because I paint the way I do, because I'm not afraid to paint over things, because I'm not worried about the lines that were below or any of the work I've done below, I'm completely happy to just paint over any part of this painting and do some fun new things, but still retain some of those facial features that I had before. And I would say one of the keys to doing any of this, to being able to paint in this method, is going to come down to a lot of practice in seeing the face as a bunch of puzzle pieces that kind of blend together. Like the upper forehead is one puzzle piece, the cheeks are one puzzle piece, all the areas that are in the shadows, you can consider that one shape in itself. There's so many individual shapes that you can see once you break down the face into its individual components. At this point with this painting, I'm basically just doing some final little touch-ups, getting some last little textural elements. These final little brush strokes are always my favorite part of the painting, just trying to get it all to come together. It's always fun to shift from that more technical side of getting the face to be very accurate, but then shifting to this more abstract way of thinking. It's almost like I'm using two different parts of my brain. But if I didn't train myself to paint in the way I do, this particular style wouldn't have been possible. So if you're a portrait painter and you're trying to get better and you're trying to paint maybe more loosely, you really have to consider what your end goal is and decide if this particular method will help benefit you in the long run. And that's really what matters. So again, thank you so much for watching this video. I will talk to you again next week.